Alright, hell yeah. So I would consider tonight's footage a fail, and we have about 3 minutes of these highlights. So this is two kayaks together. I thought this would be a really good idea, and what I've learned is that you probably want a setup of just one kayak and then two sponsons on both sides. And so this design with a complete V-rocker wasn't good, just because you can't lean. Once you're leaning onto that kayak, you can't lean any farther. So you would have to have sponsons on both sides of this craft anyway. And so I mean, this is the RMR Fat Cat, and it just looks wildly more efficient. I mean, this feels faster almost. Your displacement's about the same because your displacement's still going to be on that kayak. But that footage just showed how those sponsons, you can just aggressively go from one side to another. And so because of the extra weight and just kind of low draft into the water, and just the fact that I can't extra lean out onto an edge. I can release one portion of the boat and cool I'm on a kayak, but that's it. And when I'm sitting neutral, the other kayak isn't engaged, which I thought would be a real big positive, but it's not. You almost want that other kayak to actually be engaged because you get more surface area. I guess there's a balance between your wetted area and then here just displacement. Now the blue kayak is a displacement hole. It's a more creek boat, where this green kayak has a semi-planing hole. And so right here, this is probably the highlight. Just spins and just see if you could stab the stern. And so I'm really interested in that. And even though the stern goes in the water, you could still have a platform that's above the water to sit on, so you could still sit way back at the stern, but potentially not engage that. So anyway, and this didn't feel fast. That was one. And, just the seated position was real low. I tried to foam out as much as I wanted to, because I actually foamed a little bit higher, and then it just got more unstable, because this is the middle portion of a round boat. You know what I mean? The outside tubes are your sponsons. And so I've learned a lot, and hell yeah. So that's it for the highlights. We'll see if I talk a little bit more. Alright, hell yeah. So this is just the full footage if you want to watch the full footage. I'm definitely going to talk over it just a little bit. But we're going to be talking about, just because I got off the water, we're going to be talking about what works and what doesn't work. And so I still believe that you can make a small R1 boat. And I thought this was kind of going in that direction. But this worked. It was a success. The fact that if you're sitting in one kayak, the other kayak can be completely out of the water. But from yesterday's footage of taking the RMR Fat Cat and putting a kayak underneath it, we have already proved that a pontoon paddle cat, where the whole one pontoon can be completely out of the water. So that's kind of where I'm at, and that's mimicking even the round boat. A round boat, even if you have a floor, well, especially if you have a floor that's lower, when you go edge, you're still on a portion of the floor, and then the outer tube. And so this kayak, this design with two, is you just automatically go to that outer tube, and from a physics perspective, that always puts you on the impending tip. And this is where people are flipping over. I just flip over in a railed raft, or even just my raft in general. Once you edge and you have no more sponson or something to dig into the water to prevent rotation, the thing is just going to flip. And so that was what I learned here, is that if I lean. And it was interesting. I had to switch to that blue kayak. That blue kayak is a displacement hole creek boat. It's very smooth all over. It doesn't have a planing hole. It's just it's very rounded. And this was actually fairly stable. This felt great. I could actually, and that kind of mimics a progressive edge, where this boat, it definitely has a sharp edge. And the second I overtop that, you know, in a kayak, you just have to be actually putting your body into the water, maybe low bracing, and that just isn't going to happen. In an R1, since we don't have, you know, and we'll see if the bracing in an R1 boat can get better and more functional. But currently, since we don't have a roll, the best thing to rely on is sponsoned material. So when you do go lean on something, heck yeah, there's buoyancy that's going to resist that rotation. And so that was what I learned from last night's footage and tonight's footage. It just doesn't make sense to take this boat and then put sponsons outside of each side, because that's what you would effectively need. And the one thing I don't like about this is that the floor, but let's say this is the middle portion of a round boat, the hard V shape does not go sideways very well. And so that is something that I actually want to work on when I do a foam boat, is to see if a smooth, the middle port, instead of an I-beam floor, have it pushed out but smoother, so then your transitions sideways are a little bit more surfy. And that green boat is what I'm most interested in modifying first, because it is a planing hole, or semi-planing. It's a planing hole, and it's kind of like a half slice in the back. It has the taper of a half slice more than the creek boat. And so I'm interested in foaming that out, where the foam is above the surface line. Or even like if I did have foam on that green boat, all the foam right now would be, just kind of at the surface where the water is actually touching. And so if I am neutral, I could just be paddling the green boat just like it is. And then if I go edge, off to one side of that green kayak, then I'm kind of on just the outer tube of a round boat. And then I can put that kayak onto edge. So that's where I'm going next, is that the I-beam floor that I push out on my round boats, I'm basically showing, and from last night's footage of putting that green kayak underneath the RMR Fat Cat, is that when, that's where your dynamics are coming from. Let's say 80% of the boat is on that green kayak, and then you just are using, the outer tubes as sponsons. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And, you would want that green kayak, like last night's footage, to, when you do edge the RMR Fat Cat from last night's footage, that you're actually getting the benefit of that green kayak on edge. Because when a kayak edges, maybe it's easier, maybe it carves a turn or whatever. So those attributes. Where here, I'm not getting any of the good attributes from that kayak. And so this, I would say, was a just kind of a fail from that perspective. Now, one thing that I do want to experiment with, I don't know how I would experiment with this, is when the round boats are on really sticky big waves. I mean, just even a big wave with like a big pile, like Kelly's Whitewater Park in Idaho. I was on that, and the boat just goes into a side surf, and it just finds the bottom. And so there's no climbing up, where you can actually do maneuvers. You're just kind of stuck because of a smooth, even if it was smooth, it's even going to get lower down into there. And so that's something I want to work on, is I guess the experiment would be, is it beneficial to have a ridge in the middle? Like, this is pretty extreme of the V shape. And half of the footage is actually, reducing the tension on the wood supports, and I kind of flatten the rocker. But even then, now you're just you have more boat in the water, and so your wetted surface gets bigger, and it's no longer a benefit. And so, so that's kind of interesting. I'm not knocking this V shape, Because even in my R1 boat, I definitely want a progressive rocker in that floor side to side. Currently, though, I guess my floor is pretty flat. So, currently, the middle of my R1 boat is much like that green kayak where it is kind of a planing hole. I get a lot of speed from that. And then when I edge onto an outer tube, I'm definitely reducing wetted surface. And yeah, I think I can get more speed from that. Hell yeah. Yeah, so I don't know kind of where I'm going with this, but the next step is just to take one of the kayaks and then foam it out. And so that's kind of cool. Just like last night's footage using an RMR Fat Cat, which is just way too much. It's a lot of stability. And so I'd be kind of fascinated to take that to the wave to see if I can actually get it to dynamically, spin on the wave even at this low level. But what I'm still working on is how to get the smallest R1 boat and have it the most functional. So in this footage, I am not dynamic at all. I'm just sitting on one kayak and hopefully I don't, tip over onto one side. And just the cockpit position, and the seated position in tonight's footage, I'm not able to jump around dynamically. But I don't even have the sponsons to jump around dynamically because this is literally the guts of an R1 boat. It's just the floor. Like all I'm testing right here is just the floor dynamics. I have no other sponsoned material to actually rely on if I do kind of edge. And in some of this footage, I do try to get to that far back corner, especially on the green boat, because that kind of acts like a quadrant and that kind of releases 3/4 of the boat. But even from this footage, you never really feel like 3/4 of the boat is released. And so that's where the RMR Fat Cat from last night, that is the benefit of jumping to an outer tube. You're jumping onto a sponson. And that's where I truly like a round boat because you can jump to a back corner. You can jump just to the side, you can jump to a back corner, and so that really gives the boat a bunch of different positions. And so, hell yeah. And so I think I've kind of got this dialed as like, even if I just use one of the kayaks, like the green kayak, and cut out all the material to make like a cockpit. The cockpit will be 24 inches if I remove all the material side to side. Just like on top, so it'll be very structurally unsound, but then I'll be mounting structural support to the sides where I'll also be mounting foam. But it's good for me even just to go over this footage of like, yeah, I can literally put the sponson to foam like on the surface of the water because that's like the new surface that I'm laying in on. And so, yeah, that kind of fascinates me. And currently in my R1 design from my raft, I'm having very stair-step-like, so if the green kayak is the middle, then the next tube or the outer tubes are stair-stepped. And that's kind of fascinating. What I kind of want to work on is like, well, do you want to? Well, actually, from earlier this year, I always talked about how if you can have 2 points of contact that are separated by a considerable distance, that's always going to be more stable. And so that's where this design, I really like the front end because now you have 2 kayaks, up at the front end, where in last night's footage, the 2 kayaks would just be the RMR Fat Cat paddle cat tubes, and then the floor is just so that's the benefit of having a paddle cat where you have those 2 tubes that stab in stable, even if you had a kayak underneath or a lowered floor that made it tippy side to side. But when you initially contact a hole, both of those stabbing in is a benefit in an R1. I think hands down. It's kind of fascinating. I guess I could go the other direction and say, hey, I never jump to the front of the boat, and so I really only need foam at the rear. And then so you could have, but you definitely still need the the boat has to be equal width. That's what I have found. So if I'm jumping to the back corner, I need material up on the front corner. And so I've tested that this summer, and that's what I have. And so if you're going to have the same amount of material up on the front, two corners of the bow, you might as well have those tag the wave first. You can have them high out of the water, and so that's going to climb up out. Even if your middle, floor is still lower, and I'm able to still tip onto edge. Even if a portion of that floor, even up front, even if it like grinds in just a little bit, still better than not having the two outer tubes highly rockered. So that's kind of the design that I'm working on. The back, for sure, I want low volume. That's the only benefit from tonight, was being like, hell yeah. I definitely like how you can, work that stern and sub the stern. And I just think from an R1 perspective, you want to have more, play, and then just doing like kayakers have shown, you know what I mean? Heck yeah, doing a stern squirt kind of just makes river running just more enjoyable, because it's a quick trick that you can use, and it's very useful, in practicing skill, rotating, and, especially just any rotation. All right, hell yeah. And so, so that's it. And still, just like maybe tear apart that green boat, add foam to the sides, see where I want it, and then I'm starting in on the final design. We talked about how my boat has a stair step. Like the alpacas, they don't have a stair step. They have a definite chined edge. And so that's kind of fascinating to me as well, to, maybe experiment with that as well. And so where I could actually see is that I would want maybe a stair step, and then, because even like my boat, like right now, what I have been wanting more in my boat is the outer tubes on the corners, they dig into the waves. So I actually want more release from those outer tubes. So right now I do have a stair step, but that, like, it's not a taper. So that's the perfect place. Maybe a stair step, and on the side, but near the front and rear corners, that tube is getting in the way. So that's where I could start a taper. And also, a couple benefits here. If I started a taper there, then near the water contact would be wider in the middle, and then it would be tapered on the side. And so if I was surfing a hole, it would make the boat a little bit more rotatable. And so that's the problem of getting stuck in a side surfed in a hole, is the boat no longer becomes able to rotate. And so that's a couple things going on there. And then with the taper on the corner, I know I'm just kind of talking for my own benefit, kind of just brainstorming. But we really do want to, especially at the front and rear corner, as that taper comes up, to sharpen that edge. And so where you sit, it should be very low volume. So 1, it tapers, 2, it's low volume. So if that does catch, it's going to, even though it's the side corner of the boat, it's going to slice. And so maybe more reminiscent of even what's happening like right now, of spinning, of like a like slicing your stern through the water. And so I want that kind of concept up high, you know what I mean? It's not like the stern for a stern squirt is you're going to lay that in and it's fairly low. Right there, that front of that green raft, if I slice that sideways, still, that would be perfect. So that's the profile, no more than that right there. And even it's a little wide near the cockpit for sure. And so just kind of using that side profile. And that would be, just so it can stab. So if it does stab, it's going to shed water, top and bottom, and, even maybe to the side, because I have been thinking about kind of an hourglass shape I don't know, but I think you do want the whole boat to be fairly straight. So if you do have this sponson material that's out of the water at the top of the cockpit and the top of the rim of the boat, when paddling, you probably want to, insert the paddle at the side of the boat, and as you paddle back, you don't want any more protrusions. So you either want that to be straight, and definitely at least straight. All right, so hell yeah. So that was the footage. We did pretty good. And so I think I learned a lot, and I think I want to start taking these kayaks and trying to make R1 boats. All right, hell yeah.